How's it going, guys? Connor from Running Warehouse. I'm here with Danny Orr, General Manager of Performance Running at New Balance. Danny, we've been seeing the super shoes. We saw the SC Elite this past year, really making a big push in the super shoe world, but we haven't seen a lot from the road trickle on over into the trail. What do we have here with the SC Trail?
Yeah, and I think there's a reason, right? We've been learning so much about how that product can improve performance on the roadside, and I feel like in many ways, the speed at which we've been learning hasn't necessarily allowed us to look in too many other directions. And I feel like the fact that we feel like we're on a par, if not ahead of the industry right now in the super shoe space, allowed us to kind of think about where we could try and take some of these technologies and really tailor them with true data for what the needs of a trail runner would be today. And that's how you get to the SuperComp Trail.
And when we think of shoes on the roadside, you think really soft foam, really bouncy, but there comes difficulties when you're trying to implement that on uneven terrain. How are you able to do that here with this shoe and make it work for a wide variety of surfaces?
Sure. I think it's twofold, right? It's one about like your ability to stabilize yourself on uneven terrain. It's also trying to be as nimble as you need to be in a trail racing environment that can be quite tough with these super soft foams, you know? I think we're helped in a number of ways. One, the density of the midsole is just a little bit higher than we are in a SuperComp Elite. The outsole is obviously much bigger and much more coverage in terms of the bottom. And then we just lowered that stack height just a little bit to make sure that we were putting that racer in the optimum position from a performance standpoint. And then I think one of the unspoken things around carbon fiber plate is just how they hold the whole system together, right? So not only are they providing additional forefoot stiffness and an element of propulsion, in this instance, they're helping with some of that stability as well.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into the shoe. Obviously, it's got a FuelCell midsole, but FuelCell is a broad term. We've seen it in shoes like the Summit Unknown on the trail, which was maybe a little bit firmer, and then shoes like the SC Elite, which is really soft. Where is this gonna lie? Is this pretty close to what we see with the SC Trainer?
Yeah, it's gonna line up very well with the SC Trainer and the SC Elite. Like that underfoot foam experience is very, very similar to those two shoes. Closer to the Trainer, the materials are the same as the Trainer. I think the biggest difference there is that the slightly different stack height gives you a little bit of a different feel between those two shoes. Otherwise, they're very, very similar. And obviously coming down a little bit allows us to keep this more in a true racing weight type category versus the Trainer that's looking to kind of span kind of tempo training, everyday training, and an element of running as well, racing as well, sorry.
When you feel it, it feels pretty soft. It feels that, you know, that super foam feel. From a spec standpoint, are we looking stack height, weight in line with some of your other racing options?
Yeah, for sure, very much so. You know, and again, when you're adding the additional rubber coverage and those types of things, you've got to make some sacrifices to get to the weight targets that you have, and some of that is through deconstructing the upper. The carbon fiber plate as well is forked in the forefoot, so we've been able to remove an element of carbon fiber there, which is helping us from a weight standpoint, but then again, helping us in that uneven terrain type environment, because if you land in a slightly different way on your foot, because you've got a rock on one side or whatever the case may be, the idea is that that plate's going to flex with you in certain elements while stiffening and providing the propulsion that you need in a true racing environment as well.
Right, because when we talk about carbon plates, a lot of people think of it as a spring, but really it is that stabilizing element to that super foam compound.
Sure, and then an element of stiffening in the forefoot, right?
Right. All right, well, let's move on down to the outsole. That's what is the most important part of a trail shoe. You got to have the traction. What compound do we have, and what was the thought process when you were building this lug layout?
Yeah, so we partnered with Vibram, which we do across a lot of kind of the product in our trail line today. In this instance, we're specifically using Lightbase, which is their lightest compound, and then we spent a lot of time deciding on exactly how thick we need it to be from a rubber standpoint, from a traction perspective. I think one of the key elements in the outsole is the addition of traction lug, in which we're looking at braking traction in the heel and propulsive traction in the forefoot in a really unique and interesting way, with like additional elements that sit on the actual lug, which allowed us to go a little bit thinner in terms of the overall traction, while still maximizing what we need for somebody in a trail racing environment.
And I think we saw pretty similar design in the more Trail V3,
Sure.
is that correct?
Sure.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people don't really think about that much, but those little elements can actually make a pretty big difference when you are, hitting some of that uneven terrain. You need a little bit more bite, but again, don't want a super, super aggressive lug.
Exactly, and I think what's critical about it is how we've thought about using it, right? So the position of those additional traction elements in the heel and the forefoot is very different, right? In the heel, it's all about braking, right? When you're landing heel first, and then in the forefoot, it's all about either ascending or leaving the ground, and those two traction elements and the needs from a traction perspective are very, very different, and that's where, having it line up slightly differently in those different areas of the shoe makes a big difference.
Now, looking at net bases, where are we looking at? Is this going to be pretty in line with maybe like an SC Elite, or is it widened out for the trail?
Yeah, it's very, very similar to an SC Elite. Okay. So again, it's more around how thick the shoe is and how some of those different elements are providing the stability versus the overall footprint, as it were. Because as soon as you go broader, again, you lose that ability to be super nimble and really quick in technical areas. And we wanted to make sure that we maintain that with this shoe.
Right, there's always that balance of keeping that nimble feel, but also having enough stability inherently built into the shoe. Now, final part of the shoe is the upper. Always tricky with a trail shoe because you need that support, that stability, but at the same time, you want it to be light for the race and you want it to be breathable. Tell us about the upper.
Yeah, and you don't want any debris in it, right? So you're always working a really, really tight line in terms of trail shoes in general. And then when you're thinking about them from a true racing perspective, it is a case of how much can we take out of it without limiting the durability excessively, right? Without adding additional weight into it. And then to that point, making sure that there's a balance between an element of breathability and some of the debris-free nature that we want to make sure that we get. There's nothing worse than having a 100-mile trail race with a bunch of stuff in your shoes, right? So I think we've done a really, really nice job of stripping away where we can while maintaining some of the needs of a true kind of trail environment, at the same time maximizing what racing means in this space as well.
And you bring up 100-mile, is that where you see this could get up to? What do you think the race distances we'll see people use this shoe for?
Yeah, I think it's going to run the gamut, truthfully. I feel like we've got a great all-round kind of product here that I think will allow for somebody who's doing kind of more shorter distance trail races, but I really do think it's going to come into his own with those guys that are looking at 50 and 100 miles and what is the needs there from an overall performance and recovery standpoint.
Well, we've seen it on the marathon side. Runners at the highest level are looking for every little edge, and I think this is going to be the same thing on the trail. Last question I have for you, whether you're a pro or you're just an amateur runner looking for the very best, when can you get this shoe on your feet?
July 2023.
All right, well.
I'm going to take that back and say somewhere in the middle of 2023.
It's probably safe to say summer, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think this is a fantastic option, and for the people at home, if you're looking to get on your feet, you can find it very soon here at Running Warehouse.